Hello, my name is John Deedy, Professor of Political Science at the Community Colleges of Baltimore County. The purpose of this video series is to cover some of the course material for Political Science 101 American Government. And one thing, if you've noticed right away about me, is something very simple. Besides the fact that I love books and reading, I'm also a passionate Atlanta Braves fan. So let's get started. We think of the founding of our country as Columbus discovering America, which is all well and good. But a lot of it also goes back to the Mayflower Compact, when the Puritans, people who were considered religious zealots in Great Britain, came to this country in 1620. And even though they came here for religious freedom, when they came here, they wrote an agreement called the Mayflower Compact. And the purpose of the compact was to basically say that civil and government ordinances and laws would take precedent over religious laws. And this was an important concept in American government that is really held to this day, though there have been times where things have been a little bit queasy in that area. Over the next couple hundred years, the American colonies start to grow. More settlers come here from Great Britain, which is a good thing because it helps grow our economy. And we become really the most prosperous colony in the British Empire. People wonder, did the American colonies always want independence? And the answer really is no. If you had asked colonists in 1750, do you want independence from Britain? 99% of them would have said, no way. Why would you want to be independent from the greatest empire on the planet? The colonists were happy, but the change for that was a lot of things that happened over a long period of time, a series of patterns and abuses that really led the colonists to think about their own freedom and independence. One of the first events was the French and Indian War in the 1750s. This was a war fought by the French, Indians, and also the British and American troops. The reason the French lost this war was because the American troops were able to get to the front a lot quicker and help defeat the British. The territory, not defeat the British, but defeat the French. The territory in this battle was really the territory that we would think of Pittsburgh in western Pennsylvania today. It was over the Ohio River Valley. And when the war ended, there was no fancy parade, but there was a check that was due. The war cost the British Empire a great deal of money. And their attitude was, well, the colonists should pay for this war. We think they kind of started it. And the colonists were willing to help out. But their objection was over the issue of taxation without representation, something that James Otis from Massachusetts and later Patrick Henry adopted as themes. And what taxation without representation means, and you've probably heard that term a bunch of times, it means people being taxed and not being able to vote for their own representatives. And the British Parliament and the British government was placing taxes on the colonists, and the colonists could not even vote for these people. Another problem that occurred in this dynamic relationship, which led to it being dissolved, was the colonists saw themselves as Englishmen. They saw themselves as British subjects. The British, they saw them as the stepchild that they really don't want to deal with. Yeah, we're glad they're producing raw materials and all this stuff, but they didn't consider themselves equal to a British subject. And that's where part of the problem was. Over the next several years, the British passed a host of taxes against the colonies. And a lot of these taxes really were frustrating the colonists because their attitude was like, we want to be able to vote for these people. These taxes are creating an undue economic burden on these colonies, such as the tea tax, the sugar tax, and a variety of other things. It was frustrating the colonists. But even if you had asked the colonists in 1770, after the Boston Massacre, probably 80% of the colonists would have still said, we don't want independence. We want to be part of the British Empire. And on July 4th, 1776, if you had asked colonists in a public opinion poll, it probably would have been about 50-50. Now you may say, well, why would it be 50-50? The answer is this. There was a long series in history with the British, a series of good times. If you have a friendship that goes on for 30 years and your friend does something stupid, you don't generally end the friendship over one incident. So a lot of the colonists were trying to think of ways they could work on this. In 1773, one of the first actions that was taken by the colonists was an organization Samuel Adams created. He was a cousin of John Adams, who later became President of the United States. And Samuel Adams came up with an organization called the Committee of Correspondence. And the purpose of this committee was a letter writing campaign. He would write 25 letters to 25 leading colonists, put them in the mail saying, here are my thoughts on independence. And other colonists would get these letters, and they would write letters all over the place. Today, you would set up a Facebook page, or you'd set up your own website, and you'd appear on TV and a bunch of other varieties to do this. But this is 1773. In 1774, the first Continental Congress met in Philadelphia. And they usually met in Philadelphia because it was an easy city to get to by land and to get to by sea. They get to Philadelphia. And the delegates, the way they felt was, we need to resist the British. But we're not sure of the objectives of what we should be doing. Because a lot of the people in the room wanted to kind of like, let's resist the British, but let's kiss and make up and figure out our problems. Of course, one of the big problems was King George III. He kind of took the my way or the highway attitude on everything. In 1775, they held another meeting in Philadelphia in May, just after the Battle of Lexington and Concord. And they came up with a situation of, we really got two options. Basically, let the British do with what they want to us, or resist them by force. And they decided to resist. But even in resisting, there were people in the room that said, let's resist the British, but let's try to work things out with them later. The thought of independence was on their minds. After all, they were fighting a war against the British, but there were still a lot of people in the room that were like, we want to resolve our differences. After all, a long series of good relationships. Finally, 1776, they get to Philadelphia. In early June, a delegate from Virginia, Richard Henry Lee, introduced a resolution to the delegates. And it was a resolution that basically said, we declare ourselves free and independent. The resolution passed. And the delegates in the room, in many ways, with that resolution saying we're free, was really saying, we're free and independent, British are out of here. But what the resolution really did was say, okay, we've got all that stuff. But the delegates in the room agreed one thing. We need to write out the reasons why we're seeking independence. Not just for our own citizens, but for the world, to explain to them why we're doing this. 5 people were on the committee. But really it was Thomas Jefferson that did the work, along with John Adams doing some editing of Jefferson's writings. The work, that was the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson took about 2 to 3 weeks to write it. There's a funny musical on YouTube called 1776, if you ever get to look at it. It's about 5% accurate and 95% entertaining if you ever want to check it out. One of the first issues behind Jefferson's Declaration was the decision to do this. 13 colonies in the room. What should be the procedure for voting on this? John Hancock, who was adamant for independence, strongly believed that the resolution had to pass unanimously, all 13 colonies. Even though he desperately wanted independence, he felt it was important that all 13 colonies get on board. In the end, after a lot of debate and a lot of bickering, on July 4th, 1776, we get the Declaration of Independence. In the Declaration, Jefferson even put a phrase in there criticizing slavery. But 2 of the southern states, North and South Carolina, would not agree to sign the Declaration of Independence, ruining the unanimous vote, if they put that phrase in there. So Jefferson took it out. Congratulations, now we have independence. But now you have to do one other big thing. It's called create a government. Our founding fathers started working on this and developed our first Constitution. Not the Constitution we have today, but the Articles of Confederation. It took a long time to get done, and it was finally passed and ratified in 1781. The Articles of Confederation established a league of friendship among the colonists, not a brand new spanking government with everyone united together. It was similar to a confederation that you would think of with the Confederacy during the Civil War, even if you want to stretch this a little bit, to the United Nations. Really, the 13 states were almost 13 independent countries how they would do domestic policy. The government would create a strong foreign policy and do things, but in the end, the government under the Articles was really a failure. A failure in part because, really to put it politely, the central government was not powerful enough. 13 different states, 13 different economic policies. The country was becoming an economic basket case. In the next video, I'll talk about how we got to writing our first Constitution. Take care. Have a great day.